Okay, today's a special day because we have a former NHL player, podcaster, speaker. He does TEDx talks. He has a coaching program. He's been involved not only in professional sports as an athlete, but also as a performance coach. He's got an obsessive personality. He's about dominating, maximizing, and peak performance. And I hope I don't botch your name, Justin, but Justin Roethlingshoefer.
Nailed it, man. You could have like straight up announced that.
Okay, and this is Craig Domann talking. I am the host of the Pro Mindset today. So, Justin, let's just jump right in.
Absolutely.
Let's go back. How old are you now?
36.
Okay, so let's go back 22 years. Let's go back when you didn't know what you know now. You didn't have the warts, the brain damage, the scars of being in professional sports. And you had this dream of being a professional hockey player. What did that look like? What's the story you told yourself? What kind of energy and commitment did you make? What kind of sacrifice did you make? What did you give up to get what you wanted?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to when I was 12. I know exactly the moment where everything's really kind of shifted for me, and was 12 years old playing with 14, 15-year-olds. And for the first moment, I realized that I had some level of talent. The dream was always there. Born and raised in Edmonton. So you're kind of born with skates on. You're brought up on the hockey rink. The Edmonton Oilers were like that. Those were my people. Those were my role models. That's who I wanted to be. And at 12 years old, I was driving home in a car with my dad, and just wasn't playing very well. Was struggling with the 4 or 5 year age gap. And he looked at me and he put his hand on my lap and he said, "Son, talent will get you noticed, but consistency will get you paid." And it was from that moment that I knew, okay, I need to become the most consistent version of myself. I need to take control of what I can control. I need to start to literally become obsessed with this thing called preparation. And what did that look like? So at 13, I got a heart rate monitor. I started wearing a heart rate monitor to sleep, a heart rate monitor to train on the ice, off the ice, had a pulse oximeter looking at different metrics. I started to read medical journals. I asked all the docs for my blood work. Like, I wanted to know every single thing so that I could control the inputs of sleep, of nutrition, of training, of exercise, of recovery, of stress management. And it literally became what my focus was. That became my schooling. That became my focus. And I didn't drink. Everybody was drinking at 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. I was the guy that was staying away from all of that. I wasn't going to any parties. It was training, sleeping, focusing on what I could. And I still remember that. That's the mentality and what I took with me right through junior hockey, right through college, and then obviously into my post playing career and into my coaching career as well. As just this mentality of ownership. Is how do you take ownership of your health, of your preparation, so that you can realize outcomes that other people weren't willing to.
So is it fair to say that most people are renters instead of owners?
For sure. And I think, I mean, you hear this quote all the time, rent is due every single day. But I think when we consider it a rental, it's something, think about the difference between renting a home versus owning a home. When you're a renter, you really don't care what you do in that place. You may not vacuum, you may not clean the way that you need to. You may put a hole in the wall and you'll just throw a bookshelf in front of it instead of actually repairing it. Versus when there's true ownership of something and you take ownership of it, you respect it a whole lot more. And that level of respect that's there allows you to now have a certain set of habits, a certain set of behaviors that create different outcomes. Because when you're renting, the outcome can become somebody else's problem, can become somebody else's issue that they need to deal with. But when you take ownership of something and you truly lean in on that, not only does the respect increase, but also the responsibility that you take for the outcome also starts to rise.
Okay, so one of the things that designate, like what you just said is so true, and it's very true when you travel. when you rent a car, you don't go to the car wash and get it cleaned up before you return the rental car, right?
Yeah.
But you do that if you own it. And the distinction between ownership and renting an asset is the title.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you own it, describe the title framework of your program in, you know, in the best way you can, so that if somebody can only listen to this part, they only get to listen to the next 3 minutes.
Yeah.
They get it. What is it?
Yeah. So I'll take it from two ways. So I have to make two definitions first. We define ownership as the intersection point of accountability and responsibility. We know all the people that want to be accountable. They're like, hey, you know what? Hold me accountable, get me the coach, get me the team around me, but yet they don't take responsibility. There's always an excuse as to why something doesn't happen. Then you flip it on the other side, and we got the people who want to take responsibility. Yeah, it was my fault. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. But they failed to put the accountability networks around it to make sure that it succeeds, because the outcome is going to be inevitable as long as you engage in the proper habits and behaviors. So that's the first thing. Ownership, definition, intersection point of accountability and responsibility. We help you do that. We help you put that into place. Secondarily, we define performance as the capacity and desire to intentionally and consistently behave at a level equal to your God-given potential. And so for us, it's not a desire issue, because everybody wants to have the business, everybody wants to have the platform, everybody wants to have the career, but they don't have the capacity in order to handle what's required to ultimately see that outcome come to fruition. And it's not because they're not worthy. It's not because they're not good enough. It's not because they're not talented enough. It's not because they don't have a big enough desire. It's actually because they don't have the intentional and consistent behaviors that are required to build the capacity to make that outcome inevitable. So for us as a company, what we've put our foot forward in is to make sure that we can ultimately redeem the health of the world through equipping, educating, and empowering people to take ownership of their health for quite possibly the first time, to realize the outcomes that have already been prepared for them.
That's a wonderful framework. I want to do that. Okay. And let's say that I've got a dad bod. It's been a minute since I've been to the gym. Is this an inside game or is it an outside game? Is it about going to the gym, or is it about reflecting about why I would go to the gym? Where do you start? What's the first step?
Man. This is, I love this conversation, because the world tells us it's an outside game. The world tells us that you need the six-pack abs. The world tells us you need to lose 50 pounds. The world tells us you need to accomplish something. But here's the thing. It's not about crossing a finish line. Too many times we put a finish line on the size of our business, on the weight loss goal, on the fitness goal. And we have to realize, in business, there is no finish line. The goal is to stay in business. In health, there is no finish line. The goal is to stay healthy. There is no finish line in relationships or marriage. The goal is to stay in love. Like, these are the things we have to get back to. And so the world tells us that, hey, you need to accomplish something. So the six-pack abs, let's put that out there as like the big thing, or the lose 50 pounds. That's where this comes. So then what happens is there's now this poisoning of your heart. Emotionally, it starts to erode you, because it institutes a lot of people with fear, institutes a lot of people with overwhelm, institutes a lot of people with confusion. So emotionally, we become eroded, which starts to, again, poison our mind, poison the way we think, poison what we think about ourselves. Oh, I'm not consistent enough. Oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, I'm not worthy enough. Oh, I'm never going to be able to figure this out, which separates us from spiritually what it is that we're called to do, spiritually what it is that we're meant to be here on earth. What is our identity? What is the true thing that we have been called to create? Now, if we flip that on its head, and now we get really clear on what our identity is, what we want, what we're called to do, what we ultimately desire most out of this life, it then renews our mind. It says, no, I'm exactly where I need to be. I just need to get really focused on this certain moment. I am exactly who I need to be. I'm just going to continue on this pace, on this journey consistently, which then gives us confidence, builds us back up emotionally to step into something. And we can get really specific as to what those physical habits, physical behaviors are for the moment where we should be starting. And so for us, it's a holistic, all-encompassing solution. You can't just attack it from one way. It has to be a true mind, body, spirit component. Otherwise, you're going to disintegrate the whole system that was meant to be integrated at the get-go, and you're going to see a disintegration of your health holistically.
Justin, you don't know about Pro Mindset. You're on Pro Mindset podcast, but just finished my book here a couple weeks ago, and it's in editing. You talked about a chapter that I've written in my book, and it's really about the idea that when you do have a finish line, your brain automatically goes for shortcuts.
Yeah, totally.
It goes for hacks.
Yep.
It wants to get it's destination minded.
Yeah.
Can you go to the gym and train when you can't see the finish line?
Mm-hmm.
And every time you think you can, it moves farther away.
Yeah.
So you're just never, ever going to get there. And that's what you just described, is you're never going to get there. Right.
I think even to that point, so many people, and hopefully people listening to this will be able to relate to this. And I'll tell us a couple stories associated with this. But I just finished a marathon, did the Miami Marathon down here a couple weeks ago. And there was a couple people I was running it with, and they were like, man, I'm just going to be so excited when this is over. And they're like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. And I said, bro, do you realize the marathon actually has nothing to do with this whole thing? I said, running a marathon is not impressive. There's absolutely nothing impressive about it, to be honest with you. I said, what's impressive is the 9 months of training you did leading up to this. Running 26.2 on one day is just a formality. That's all it is, to say, hey, we've accomplished it. But then there's always something next. And for me, when I stopped playing, I needed something to compete at, because my identity was still so wrapped up in what I did on those 3-letter words or those 3-letter league that you're a part of. And that's when I got into CrossFit. That's when I got into DECA races. That's when I got into Spartan races. That's when I got into triathlons. And I always found that as soon as I crossed the finish line, whether I won the race, whether I went to world championships, whether I won nationals, whatever it was, I always had this emptiness in me. I couldn't figure out what it was. And it was because that I put my worthiness in the accomplishment of something and finishing a finish line, thinking that that would bring my worthiness. That would make people see me differently. That would give me the affirmations that I was actually seeking. Where in actuality, I had already been chosen. I had already everything that I actually needed. And I went out for a run because I was like, I have to figure this out. I'm going to stop competing, because I would get up to the start line and I'd get this massive amount of anxiety. And I couldn't figure out what was happening, because I'd finished the race. And for a period of time, I was winning everything. And I was, but I'd still have that emptiness feeling. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to stop competing for a season, because I have to figure this out. And I just started to run. And I put this goal on the board. I was like, I'm going to run 2 miles a day for 3 months. 2 miles a day, every single day. It's just going and getting it done. And on the very last day, day 90, mile 179.9, I'm on my way back. And I'm like, man, I'm getting that same exact feeling. And I got this word in my head, and it was, you know what your win is? Your win is not finishing. And I sat down on the spot. I started to cry. And it literally felt like this freedom come off of me, because I'm not defined by what I do. I'm not defined by my accomplishments, but rather you define yourself by what you're called to do, who you're called to serve, and how you prepare your body, how you prepare your mind, how you steward these things is ultimately what matters, is what gives you the capacity to serve at the level that you're truly called to, which only gives you more opportunity and responsibility to take on, because you're ready and able to handle it. And so I see preparing yourself mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, simply as a form of stewardship, so that you can take on more, serve more, and do more. There is no finish line, because anytime we put an artificial finish line on something is the moment that we cut our potential short from what it is that we can actually accomplish.
That is amazing, Justin. That is amazing. And I can tell you from personal experience and also representing athletes that have won the biggest prize. It is emptiness.
Yeah.
The journey, the brotherhood, the overcoming adversity. It's it's doing what the naysayers said you couldn't do. It's beating the team that no one thought you should.
Yeah.
That's where the joy's at. It's not in the trophy. It's not in the finish line. You said so many golden things in there. I'm just going to reflect on a couple. One is it's more about becoming the man or the person that God created you to be than in doing something or accomplishing something. And if you can serve people and live out his mission for your life, that's where you're going to find purpose.
Yeah.
And the selfish goals we all have, which they're fine. You don't get satisfaction from that. You get satisfaction from helping others, leading others, mentoring others, serving others. That's where the true purpose in life comes from. So you talk about four things. You talked about the mind, body, spirit, and emotion. What happens when one of them is, I look at it like a stool, four-legged stool. Three of them are pretty strong, and one of them you're kind of short. It's going to wobble. What do you see as the symptom, the condition that is most often that's shortchanged? And what is the remedy to fix it?
Yeah, so I think that's the funny thing is it's different and it's unique for everybody. And the short peg on the stool, to use your analogy, it all is determined based off of your habits, behaviors, past experiences, thoughts, and beliefs. And so when we start to, we can start to get into this concept of what happened to you as a kid. What beliefs did you start to formulate about yourself, about your circumstance, about your situation? What things did you experience? What things did you go through that ultimately created some of these shortcomings or these legs on the stool that didn't get fully developed and now left you exposed? Because again, I like to give stories that people can latch onto. In my career, I was not the biggest guy. I was 5'9" on a good day. From the ages of 14 through 17, I went through a severe bout of anorexia, major body dysmorphia that really created this massive mind shift for me in terms of how I fit in and what I needed to do and what my worthiness was all about. And just asking people to choose me, select me, tell me I'm good enough, even though I would make these teams, but you always had to prove your worthiness, prove that you were going to be selected. And as I went through this, I always took it as it was, and I think a lot of athletes will relate to this. It's me versus the world. It's me versus everybody else. And it was this scrappy mentality. Well, as soon as it helped me succeed in life for a long time. It helped me to get through or get by for a long time. But I didn't realize the consequences that it was coming with, because it was just getting me to where I wanted to go, not to what God had ultimately prepared me for. And so it wasn't until I started to find a lot of these difficulties that I was having in life, from how do we grow and scale the business? Well, I couldn't be scrappy anymore. I had to be more relational driven. I had to be more thoughtful in my approach, because the scrappiness that got me here wasn't the scrappiness that was going to get me to the next level. We had to do things differently. And so I think that's how we often act in this situation that you talked about, the mental, physical, spiritual, emotional side, is each and every one of us have a different short leg of the stool. But we have to identify what that short leg is. Maybe it's the fact that you've never thought you were worthy to be fit. You never saw yourself as a fit person. And because you never saw yourself as a fit person, you can never develop the habits and behaviors consistently that are ultimately going to create the outcome to be a fit person. Maybe you never saw yourself as a successful person. And so because you never saw yourself that way, you're going to continue to stay away from or shy away from the habits and behaviors that ultimately generate and formulate success. So it's not that you're not successful. It's not that you're incapable of it. You actually have been called for success. You've been called for abundance. You've been called to serve. You've been called to be fit. You've been called to be well. But the experiences that you've been through, the thoughts that you've developed, the habits and behaviors that you've adopted, either intentionally or unintentionally, have created your reality. And the reality that you're living in does not have to be the one that you stay in, as long as you choose something different. But we have to make sure that different is unique to you.
I love that, and I agree 1,000,000% with that. I think people want to live in the future more than they want to live anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And people that have had some trauma, had some failures, they want to live in the past. Nobody wants to live in the present. Athletes struggle to live in the present. They like in football, it's a 6-second play. A lot of the guys are thinking about the last time they called the play. The last time they played this team and they called that play. They're not thinking about the play, and they're thinking about, hey, if it works or if it doesn't work, what's the potential recognition, fame, outcome? Hey, we get to whatever it might be, maybe personal, maybe team, but no one can stay in the moment.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to stay in the moment. Even you and I doing this podcast right now, there's going to be temptations for both of us to think about what you're going to do afterwards, what I'm going to do afterwards. Or, hey, I might ask you a question and your brain flashes back to a different podcast you had, and they asked you the same question. You're not even in the moment. You have been in the moment, because I can tell how you've been flowing. You're in the moment. But the challenge is it's a very difficult operation to be in the moment. The other thing that I see is that unless you can reframe your past, like let's say, for example, you and I, or are you married?
I am.
Okay. So if I would interview you and your wife, how long have you been married?
I would be married for 2 years.
Okay, not very long ago. If I asked you guys both about your honeymoon or about your wedding night or some special moment, there's 3 memories. There's yours, there's hers. They're not the same, right?
And then what actually happened?
What really happened? So it's like when you see your boys from high school and junior hockey and back in the days in the NHL, and it's like, hey, you remember we played so and so? Nobody remembers it the same, and you just kind of chalk it up to, hey, maybe they had too much to drink. So our mind chooses memories based upon emotions. Mm-hmm. You might have been exercising or experiencing a little bit different emotion than your wife. Maybe very similar, but different. And it's like, you have to reframe your memories so that it's for you and not holding you back. And so when you were describing all those things about habits and behaviors and past experiences and thoughts, every single one of them is tied to your emotions. Thoughts?
No, you're exactly right. And I think when you talk about being in the present moment and that flow state, right? There's something called the reticular activating system in our brain. And the reticular activating system in our brain is almost like this. For those that don't know what that is, it almost acts as like this Google search engine. And if I say, let's use your example of talking about, I had this play that happened against me 3 games ago, or a week ago, or 5 years ago. And this play constantly comes over and you got beat wide and the quarterback threw a perfect throw over top of your shoulder, and it ended up being a touchdown that won the game. Well, when you all of a sudden see that play happen again, and that's what you've been rewinding in your brain over and over and over and over and over and over again, your brain's going to figure out a way to make that happen again, because that's what it believes you want to have happen, because your brain cannot determine the negatives. It's like, here, Craig, don't think of a pink elephant. What did you think about? A pink elephant. Your brain cannot think in the negatives. And so often our default is to say what we don't want to happen. I don't want to drop the ball. I don't want to go bankrupt. I don't want to get in a car wreck. I don't want to burn the toast. I don't want to make my wife angry. But what our brain hears is, get in a car accident. Oh, burn the toast. Oh, do this. And because it's constantly seeking these things, it is going to find ways in order to bring us into moments to make these things actually happen. And so this is where we have to, again, be so intentional. That's why I say performance is not outcome driven. I've spoken on by now about 300 stages, asked about 40,000 people the same question: how would you define performance? And often what I get words like winning, results, attaining a goal, efficiency, accomplishment. These are just other words for outcomes. And we've now stated that performance is truly based on an outcome. That's how we judge a performance. Well, actually, performance is nothing other than preparation. You're not going to win all the time, but you could have performed really well because you prepared for what it is you were trying to do. And so performance, like I said, is the capacity and desire to intentionally and consistently behave at a level equal to your potential. So if we can actually come back to this and say, hey, performance has nothing to do other than focusing on intentional and consistent behaviors that are going to make the next thing inevitable, that is what matters. I say there's only 4 mindsets, Craig, that we can abide by. 4. That's it. Impossible, possible, probable, or inevitable. And anybody who is seeking success, anybody who is seeking to live a life that's different than the norm, anybody who's seeking something that is uncommon, has to abide by only one of these, and that is the mindset of inevitability. There's going to be an outcome whether you like it or not. There's going to be an outcome whether you like it or not. We are going to finish this podcast whenever it is done, and there will be an outcome whether we like it or not.
Absolutely.
Either I prepared coming in or I didn't. The outcome will be what it may. I can't control the outcome. All I can control is my preparation leading up to it. And the performance that happens is ultimately what I was determined to do. If you don't like the outcomes are simply lagging effect of your habits and behaviors that have been then ultimately leading up. So if you don't like your outcomes, don't blame the circumstance, don't blame the situation. Simply look at the habits and behaviors that you've been engaging in and figure out where something needs to change so that your outcomes can ultimately be elevated. And the inevitability that's already coming in every aspect of our life. You can start to practice this in the most simple thing. You're going to have dinner tonight. You are going to have dinner. There will be an outcome that will be you eating dinner. What does that dinner look like? Was it something that was performed well, or was it something that was performed not? Well, did you plan what you were going to eat? Did you cook it yourself? Did you talk with your spouse about who was going to do it, where you were going to sit, how you were going to eat it? Was it going to be a meal on the road? Was it going to be a meal sitting down at a table? The outcome is going to happen, but how are you preparing for it to happen? And the more that you start to realize this, that we live in a world where inevitability happens all around us, where outcomes are constantly happening and constantly moving and constantly shaping, our habits and behaviors are the ones that are dictating those outcomes. And the choices that you're making from each habit and behavior are simply a vote of the person that you're wanting to ultimately end up being.
I love that. And I agree with that. And I would add something to that. The standard that you
for sure
apply to your preparation is critical. And that's what differentiates 2 people that are very similar, that have the same God-given abilities, that have the same intentions, that have the same opportunities. It's who holds themselves to a higher standard.
Yeah.
Because some people, I think there's 3 things that go with systems and processes and habits. Number 1 is you got to have one. Number 2, you got to work it. So a lot of people build systems in their minds for New Year's resolutions, but they don't work it for very long. They might work it for 3 weeks. But to really be great, not only do you have to work it, you have to work it with a standard. Mm-hmm. That's a higher standard.
Yeah.
Right?
That's good. I think the other piece that comes along with that is once you set it, like James Clear says all the time, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And a lot of us has systems that are basically set on default for failure. And when you're ultimately building something that is so focused, and you talked about this standard that you're setting, this standard that you're going for, this standard that you're putting forth. When you can create a deep level of intentionality to that and be willing to come back to the table and know that when you set the standard of excellence, if that's where you're putting it at, your system may actually change. You can't set a system and run the same system for the next 25 years and expect to see outcomes that you're determining. You might have an outcome that was not what you wanted, but let's learn, how do we create a new system, something that we might have to tweak, something we might have to refine, something we might have to reassess, so that we can now get to where we're going further, because that wasn't a failure. That was simply a learning experience that we had to shift and twist, and we had to go through that outcome in order to go on our journey. Like, that's why I love the process. Like, if you don't love the process, man, get off the horse and stop playing the game.
Amen. Amen. I talk about identity killers, and there's probably 50, but I talk about 4 primary ones. The most harmful one is comparison.
Good one.
Perfection.
Another good one.
Because you're comparing yourself. It's really a form of comparison.
Mm-hmm.
Because how good could you be and how perfect could you be, instead of how good are you and how you're growing and developing and all those types of things. The other 2 are a little bit different. One is desperation. When you feel like you're running out of time, you feel like the opportunity may be slipping away, the window of opportunity may be closing. I see a change in people's identity because they become desperate.
Yep.
And they start doing things uncharacteristically. And then the last one I don't think too many people have heard of, and that is a dishonest assessment of where you're at and whether what you're doing is going to get you to where you want to go. So when you talk about inevitable outcomes, when you're dishonest with yourself about how hard you're working and what you're doing, you're going to have an inevitable outcome, but it's not going to be the one you wanted.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep. So,
but Pro Mindset Framework, just to give you the 10-second version, it's really what's your story, what are your systems, and what is your stage? And it's rewriting your story to be more in alignment with your dreams and your purpose. It's working your systems at a very high standard, and it's winning your stage, but you have to define your stage before you can win your stage. And stages are more than stages, like being a keynoter or a musician. It's more than the boardroom. It's more than a field or a court or a rink. It's all the small moments too. It's the phone call you get inquiring about your business coaching, and it's a information person at a Fortune 500 company. You don't know who they are, and you're on stage right there, right? So
100%.
Let's go spiritual for a second. How does purpose, calling, come into play in peak performance and in really having joy and impact on this planet?
It's the foundation. It's the foundation of how you operate, because at the end of the day, if you think that you have the strength, if you think that you can take the pressure, if you think that you can carry the load and the burden, it's going to crush you every single time. And for me, I lay my foundation in Jesus. Like that's where I lay my foundation, and knowing that I have a calling. I was created for a purpose. I was created for a mission. And all I need to do is steward this. All I need to do is be obedient. All I need to do is be still, silent, and listen, so that I can ultimately step into where it is that I've been called. And that hasn't always been, I haven't always been good at that, to be honest with you. A lot of my career was spent going and doing and serving the people that I wanted to, rather than going the direction in which I was called. And it's not that I did anything wrong. It's not that I It's not that I ruined the plan. That's not what it's about. But it's about, hey, I've learned all these lessons along the way. I've gained all this wisdom along the way, and the journey that I've gone on is continually brought me back to what it is that I was forged and created for. And there's this lightness there. There's this hope there. Um, Jesus talks about how his yoke is easy, his burden is light. And there's a lot of times during my life where my yoke has been heavy and my burden has been heavier, and it's because that's what I've tried to forge it. I've tried to open the doors. I've tried to break down the walls. Going back to that scrappiness, right? Is like that's what I knew. That's what I knew that it was all about. Is you had to break down the wall. You had to knock in the door in order to create an opportunity for yourself. And what often happens is it goes back even to your identity pieces. Is a lot of times I would look desperate. There was moments where I would get into rooms with people that I knew could make something or could break something or could elevate something for me. And you all of a sudden didn't take the same lightness, the same ease, the same personality. You looked desperate, and it broke relationships. It broke opportunities. It didn't even allow the door to open. Whereas now you're living in, to be honest with you, from our business, from the ways we're serving people, from the connections, from the doors we're in, the stages I'm on, it's this truly opportunity of abundance where you've just gone and are living and operating in your calling, living and operating in where you're at. And it's completely everything that I was chasing for so long because my order was misaligned. When I got my order right, all of a sudden everything I was chasing turned around and started to chase me. And that's the best way that I can describe it. Is it's this newfound hope, this newfound peace, this newfound joy that the outcome doesn't matter because I'm simply on a journey. I'm simply on a journey and I'm not doing it alone. And I've already got this calling that has been forged for me. I've have this anointing and this favor over me. And it's not just me. I'm not anybody special. I'm one step from stupid. But every single person has this on their life. It's just they haven't gotten still enough. They haven't gotten silent enough. They haven't surrendered enough to figure out what this actually is. And so something that might be helpful for people in this is I've got this acronym: is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And so when we slow down, stillness, silence, surrender, it gives us the chance to listen, so that once we listen, we have the opportunity to be obedient to gain the wisdom of what to do next. And so slow is smooth, smooth is fast, and slowing down and using that acronym to kind of come through this allows that to actually happen. And for me, that's how I wrote my books. That's how I came up with business plans. That's how I came up with new opportunities. That's how I got into that's how we bought our home. Like, it was all started with slowing down and listening to what it was that we were truly called to, or what we were supposed to do in the moment, so that then we could be obedient. And Rich Wilkerson, he's one of the real big, powerful speakers and pastors in America right now. He's obviously down here at Miami, pastoring VU. He's become just a real deep spiritual mentor to me. And it's something that we talk about often, but he defines spiritual maturity as shortening the amount of time between hearing God's voice and taking action. And I think if we can actually just slow down, we can get a little bit more in tune to what that is. We can now listen and be obedient to it. You're going to notice that life just starts to transform right before your eyes with whatever it is that you feel burdened with or heavy with and not knowing what direction to go.
That's fantastic. Okay, so I want to, just for our listeners, slow, the acronym, what is the S? Is that slow?
Slow is stillness, silence, and surrender.
Okay, and then L is listen.
Listen, yep.
Obedient, and then get wisdom.
Yep.
Okay, all right, that's good. Well, in my life, I've experienced that identical process. When you're trying to make it on your own, you just get bumps and bruises.
Yep.
And God does give us the wisdom and the intelligence to figure it out ourselves, but he doesn't always allow the pathway to open up unless it's his idea, not our idea. And so when you do follow your calling and you obey what you feel like the Lord's calling you to do, things are easier. He redeems time.
Yes, good.
He redeems relationships.
Yeah.
He redeems finances. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter what it is. It's
good.
like, oh, this is impossible. No, it's not.
It's literally just about to say that. Whatever and it's oftentimes, it's not the goal that you're like, oh, I can attain this on my own. It's the thing that you're like, oh, bro, there's no way I can do this. There's no way I can make this happen. There's no way we're going to turn this around. There's no way we're going to buy that home. There's no way we're going to get this venture up and running and actually profitable. There's no way I'm going to heal from this. And all of a sudden God says, hey, here, hold my beer. Watch this. Just trust me. and that's the thing. Like, it wants to come back. It's if it was doable by human capacity, he wouldn't be needed. But guess what? He wouldn't need us either. He wants us. He chose us. And so he wants us to choose him as well. And when we give him the glory, he opens up the impossible. And that's, I think, what's so cool is by being able to lead and operate in that step and in that steadfastness and being so deeply rooted, it allows us to stand close, stand firm, have a standard of which we operate so that the outcome, which already is predetermined and already prepared for you, can ultimately be realized.
Okay, Justin, share as much as you want. What is your daily habit, daily ritual, or weekly, to be still?
So good. I'm glad you asked. So this is, and I think this is, again, this is individual for everybody, but I think I'll share my story a little bit because I'm very bad at it. Everybody's like, oh, just meditate, or, oh, just go get some breath work in. Well, I got ADHD. I've got I'm this guy that's always bouncing around, always moving, got 99 things on the go, have every reason in the world not to slow down. But I've learned that when I slow down, that's when things start to happen. And so for me, first thing in the morning, I'll wake up around 6:15. I go outside and I turn on, we've got this big gym outside that we've kind of built with big barrel sauna, cold plunge, outdoor shower. It's a pretty cool setup out here in Miami. And I'll go sit outside, I'll turn the red lights on, and I'll just get into my Bible for 15 minutes. Just grounds me, gets me to just like be still, listen, silent. You hear just, again, the silence of like the birds chirping. It's amazing. And then I get into a workout. I just start going and working out. I don't play music. I usually had headphones in just so that it's nice and quiet. And I just start to think. And as I'm thinking, sometimes I just take notes. I've got a notepad out there and I just take notes. And then from there, I go into the sauna and I breathe for about another 10 or 15 minutes. And so my whole stillness, silence time in the morning is about an hour and a half. And then I've made two very distinct action points. So number one, you got my hour and a half in the morning so literally right before this podcast started, I had a 5-minute block on my calendar from 12:55 to 1 every single day, where I take 5 minutes and I just get still. And I'm just like, God, what do you want me to know? What do you want me to realize? What do you want me to understand? And sometimes I don't get anything, and that's okay. Other times I get a massive download, and but it centers me, it grounds me. And then my third one that I'll do in the day is whenever my day is over, before I go and reconnect with my wife, is 5 minutes. I'll end my day. Maybe that's 7:25, maybe that's 7:30, maybe that's 8 o'clock, maybe that's 6:30. Doesn't matter what time it is, but 5 minutes after I close my computer. 5 minutes. God, what do you want me to know? What do you want me to realize? What do you want me to understand? And I just get quiet for 5 minutes and then I go reconnect. And it's really just been amazing to see the downloads you get, the clarity you get, the peace you get, the joy you get in how you're able to operate.
That's fantastic. I find that the more time I take, the faster things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I do breath work. I do cold plunging. I do workout, not religiously every day. And today I did them all. 5 minutes and 44-degree water is not a lot of fun, but you know what? If I can do that, nothing today is going to be harder than doing that. And my wife's got a phenomenal practice of she sets an alarm every day at 3:16 p.m. And that's a reminder of, okay, John 3:16. And so one of the things I would encourage all the listeners to do is find a group to get into. Find a friend, find a neighbor, find a coworker that's ahead of you in this area of life, because it does give you more freedom,
Yeah.
gives you more peace, more joy, and honestly, it gives you more success.
100%. 100%. It's crazy. If you would have told me, I don't want to get super down this road here, but I just feel convicted to say this. Our world makes Christianity, religion feel so rigid. And there's a lot of things that when we see the way that we're operating, some of the most quote unquote religious people are some of the meanest people that I've ever had interactions with. And when I actually started to realize what a relationship with Jesus was, literally just like a relationship with you and I, Craig, a relationship with anybody else, it's another relationship, talking, just full of love, full of kindness. And when I realized that that's what it was all about, it opened doors for me and I'm not talking about success doors. It opened doors for true fulfillment, true joy, true peace that I think a lot of us are seeking. And when you get around people who have that same level of discernment, that same level of connection, that same level of relationship, you all of a sudden start to realize that there is a life that's done differently. You don't have to be like everybody else. You can be different. That's what we're called to be, is different. We're called to be unique. We're called to be uncommon. And we can show people the way that when you have that deep relationship, there's massive reward on the other side, not just monetarily, not just materialistically, but eternally. And that's what it's all about. And that's where we're trying to go. And that's just what's so exciting to me, is like being able just to shout it from the rooftops, because the lightness that I live with, the peace that I live with, no matter how good things are, no matter how bad things are, I know that I'm on the journey that I've been called to be on. And there's just so much freedom there. And I want everybody to experience that. And going back to the second comment that you made about finding somebody that's ahead of you, you don't need somebody that's 99 steps in front of you. You need somebody that's just half a step in front of you, somebody that's already walked a little bit of what you've been in. They don't have to have it figured out. To be honest, nobody does. I don't have it. You don't have it. Nobody does. And you're constantly learning. But there's always somebody that has one half step ahead of you. And if you, not comparing, but ultimately just loving and honoring their journey and saying, hey, can you teach me something? Hey, can I learn something from you? And being that that evergreen student, being that person that has the humility, has the grace, has the honor to be able to go to somebody and say, hey, can I learn from you? Hey, can I be around you? Hey, can I take in your ecosystem that you engage in? That's when life changes. That's when life becomes fun, and you just get exposed to a whole new way of doing things.
No doubt. Well, this has been a wonderful interview. I appreciate you, Justin. Is there anything that you would like to share that I didn't ask about? I was thinking of an acronym for OWN when you were talking there. Obedient, wisdom, but I couldn't come up with the end, because there is a spiritual blessing on you and your business. And if you would listen to the Lord, I think He would tell you what own it really means. And it has a greater purpose than you even thought it did.
I appreciate that, and I receive that. It's something I'll be leaning into. It's the one that we didn't get into this, but the book I've got coming out, The Power of Ownership, Redeem Your Health, Live Life by Design, and Break the Relentless Pursuit of Normal. It's just really special. It's something that I think is really going to resonate with people in a big, big way. And I talk about preparing yourself for what's already been prepared for you in there. And what does this actually blueprint look like so that you can take ownership of your habits, your behaviors? How do you steward this vessel that you've been gifted so that you can realize a life done differently? I've got an acronym I break down for the word prepare: purposeful priorities, replace certain habits, expend energy, persistent practice, accepting accountability, rest, reassess, and refine, and then expect the outcome. And so really making sure that we are able to steward this thing and just understand it at a better level. Because if I can take you from a state of knowing what the world has told you is true to a state of understanding what your uniqueness is actually calling you to, that's when you go from having to be convinced to do something to where now you can finally be convicted to do it. And I think that's, I'm just so excited for that. You can get that at thepowerofownershipbook.com. But just really, really grateful for the platform, really grateful for the relationship with you now, Craig, and just the opportunity to have this conversation.
Okay. One final question. Where are you in the book? When did the power of ownership hit you? What were your circumstances? What were you dealing with? And how did this, download come to you that you needed to write the book about your experience?
Yeah, so this book came to me. So John Gordon became a very good friend, and John and I were playing pickleball, and we were actually sitting down last year and watching Texas and Alabama football play. We were watching the game together, and he says, "Tell me about Own It. Tell me about the company." So we got deep into it, and we started talking, and he goes, "Man, there's a book in there. There's many books in there." And as I left his home, started to put some things together, got a book deal with Wiley, and I wrote this book, and I sent the manuscript over to John, and he sent me back an email. I was so excited, right? I was like, "Man, John, I did it. It's amazing. It feels good." He writes this back. He goes, "There's 3 books in here, not 1. Fix it." and as I went and I wrote the book, I got to the point where I had to turn the manuscript in, and I just had this deep download of, this isn't the book you were supposed to write. This wasn't the book. This isn't it. I'm a week from having to turn the manuscript into Wiley. I take a week off of all meetings, all everything. I clear my calendar, and I go and there's this about 18-foot table, 18-foot long, about 8-foot wide, in our kitchen area. And I have everything spread out. I have all the manuscripts spread out. I have chapters laid out. I've got sticky notes bouncing back and forth. I'm striking things. I'm writing stories that needed to go back in, rearranging things. And all of a sudden I have this epiphany of, this is what needs to go in the book. This is when it was all about. It was not about you as a kid. This isn't a story about you. This is a story about trying to find, how do you live in accordance to your mission and purpose? How do you live in accordance to this? And it was really about how my time in the NHL, how my time as this health and performance director who was literally helping the best athletes in the world live to maximize their potential, but was failing to do it for himself, was failing to do it in this way, and was failing to steward this guy. And the moment that I was able to realize that, the moment that I was able to understand that I was the one undercutting my potential, that I was the one that was not living in accordance to how I needed to, that I was the one that was sabotaging future blessings and future responsibilities that God was waiting for me to take on. That was the story that needed to be told. That was the story that needed to be leaned into. And that's the story that was ultimately written.
That is awesome. That resonates with me. Okay, Justin, somebody wants to find you. How can they find you? Where can they give them the title of all 3 of your books, your website? If there's somebody out there that wants to hire you to be a keynoter, where can they find you?
Yeah, very, very simple. I'm very active on social media through Instagram. So at Justin Roth, Roeth. And then I'll just give you one simple website where you can navigate everything else from there, is ownitcoaching.com. You can contact us from there. There's a contact us area that'll come to us, whether it's keynoting, and then we can give you all the necessary links from there. But ownitcoaching.com, that's the best way.
Justin, thank you so much. I challenge everybody listening today to go own it today. I'm going to own it. Thank you so much for being on.
Thanks, Craig.
Hang with me. Hey, it's Craig Domann, the host of Pro Mindset Podcast. I want to thank you for listening or watching today's show. And you can catch us every week on the normal social media platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and all the listening podcast platforms. I hope you enjoyed today's show. And more importantly, I hope you gained a pro mindset insight. Please be sure to rate and review Pro Mindset Podcast. And I look forward to catching up with you on our next show.